Is traditional book publishing dead? Who is it for? Do you qualify? What are the pros and cons of traditional publishing? And finally, of course, how do you get a deal? As a bonus, I'm also going to cover the pros and cons of self-publishing, since that has completely taken off. All of this will be covered in this episode. I'm Arman Assadi. You can learn more about me at armanassadi.com. I have consulted with and am friends with and have worked on the book launches of many New York Times bestselling authors. For example, Neil Patel, the New York Times bestselling author of Hustle, and Lewis Howes, the New York Times bestselling author of The School of Greatness and The Mask of Masculinity. The point is, I've been in this world and this industry for quite a while now and seen quite a few evolutions. And so I'm really excited to just break this all down. I'm also the author of the book Unleashed, tentative title, and I'm represented by Folio Literary Agency. That's my agent. So I've been in this world, deeply immersed in it. And here's what I can tell you first and foremost as we go into these 5 points. Creating and writing a book is like childbirth, is like giving birth. I've heard that phrase so many times from so many different authors. And I think the reason for that is that it's a painfully long process. It's painful, it's messy, it's long, but at the end of the day, it's beautiful and rewarding. And so it's not for the faint of heart. It's not easy. And you can't be doing this for any other reason than to truly be innately and internally, intrinsically motivated. Anything less than that, I think you're just not going to survive the painfully messy process that you have to go through to create the book. So make sure that your motivations are properly set in place and that they're true when you begin this journey. Okay, let's dig into number 1. Is traditional publishing dead? So currently today, there are 5 major publishers. They call them the Big 5, and they continue to consolidate over time. It used to be more than that. The current 5 in order of size of revenue, not necessarily prestige or anything like that, but revenue size are Penguin Random House, Hachette, HarperCollins, Macmillan Publishers, and Simon & Schuster. These are the Big 5 today. Now, in the last 5 years in particular, self-publishing has completely taken off and revolutionized the publishing world. There used to be this barrier to entry, which is really challenging in the sense of like publishing a traditional book is very challenging. And so that was a barrier to entry for so many people, and self-publishing has completely removed that, has put the power in the hands of the authors, and has allowed people to put books out there that they never would have had the ability to do in the past. Now, they're very different, and we're going to discuss how they're different, but it's important to note that self-publishing has completely taken off. You have companies like Scribe, who formerly used to be called Book in a Box, founded by, I believe, 4 times New York Times bestselling author. I think he's got 4 of them, Tucker Max. So Scribe is a major disruptor to this space. And I can tell you from being friends with the people in this company that they're expanding and growing and they're not slowing down. As a side note, I'm mentioning Scribe because it's another option. If you want an introduction to Scribe and you want to self-publish, they're actually what's considered a hybrid publishing model because they bring together the best parts of the traditional process and merge it with the self-publishing process, which we're going to break all that down. But if you want an intro to them, just message me, let me know. I'm happy to introduce you directly to the CEO. So that's the first thing. Is traditional publishing dead? It's not. I think that a lot of people want it to be dead, and I think that it's majorly disrupted, but it's still not dead. It's clinging on though. And like all industries, they are going to have to innovate. They're going to have to be malleable and flexible and move with the times of what the authors need and want in order to stay competitive with companies like Scribe. These Big 5 still exist. And like I said, they're buying up all the smaller independent publishers and they're consolidating. And there is still this prestige with traditional publishing, but it's not for most people. And so to answer the question, is it dead? It's not dead, but it has changed a lot. And something needs to happen very quickly for it to thrive. Because I would say, while it's not dead, it's not necessarily thriving. So now, number two, who is traditional book publishing for? First and foremost, I think it's for very few people. Very few people are going to have the tolerance to deal with the process. It takes a long time. It's like 10 times longer than doing your own self-published book. Like you could turn around a self-published book in a couple weeks, but a traditionally published book is going to take minimum from the time of the book deal happening 12 months, more like 18 months on average. It's for very few people that, for reasons that we'll discuss, but the type of person that I would say it is for is a career author type of person, someone who really wants to dedicate a major portion of their lives to writing and publishing books. Especially, I think this applies in fiction. Not to say that you can't self-publish a fiction book. You absolutely can. One of the best selling books recently, I don't have the title off the top of my head, was a poetry book that was self-published and sold millions of copies and then went on to be traditionally published. So, some of the authors that come to mind are like Stephen King, but also on the nonfiction side, Ryan Holiday, Deepak Chopra. These are career authors. And so in that sense, it's for very few people. It's for someone as well that's looking to really expand their audience. They're more focused on reach and audience than they are on money, because you make way less money traditionally publishing your book. And another thing is that you could always, who traditional publishing is for is maybe for someone who already self-published their book, has had some success, and is now looking to scale. If you can self-publish your book and sell copies, sell 5,000 copies, sell 20,000 copies, that'd be even better. And then go and try to get that traditionally published deal, it's going to be so much easier for you. So I think that's really the core components of who it's for. So let's go into the nitty gritty of, do you qualify? Because I think this is something a lot of people wonder about. Well, first of all, you need an agent. Trying to traditionally publish your book without an agent is virtually impossible, and also just not recommended. You need an agent because the editors at these traditional publishers are not spending their time looking at the random queries of authors that just cold call send in their book proposals. That's just not going to work, because they go into what's called the slush pile. The agent is a person who is respected and has a direct relationship with the editor, the acquiring editor of the publisher, like say at Penguin Random House or HarperCollins, and they will take your proposal and on your behalf literally send it over to them and get their attention. And so you need an agent. And of course, an agent wants their cut. And that cut is generally, 10 to 15% you should expect to be sharing in terms of your book royalties with this person at a minimum. And to me, if you're going to traditionally publish a book, that is completely worth it. I think of it the same way I think of having a representative in anything. It's like having a broker to go sell your company. Having someone when you're exiting your company to do that deal, they have access to the relationships and they handle a lot of the legal side of things, the paperwork. There's so many terms at play, and they ensure that you get the best deal possible and continue to get the best deal possible. You need a world-class book proposal. World-class. A book proposal is essentially a business plan for your book. The editor and at the publisher itself, I think of similar to like a venture capital firm. This is a publisher that is looking to invest in you and your book, which is a business that they intend and need to make a profit on. When they give you that advance, because with traditional publishing, you receive an advance of say $100,000, that is an advance on royalties that you would receive for the life of this book. So say you receive easy math. Let's just do some easy math. Say you receive $2 for every book you sell. That means that they're giving you advance payment on the first 50,000 copies of the book that you sell if they give you a $100,000 advance. After you have earned back your advance of $100,000, then you'll continue to receive that $2 a book. So the publisher is essentially making and placing a bet on you that you can sell books. They're not placing a bet that they're going to sell your book. They're not doing the major heavy lifting of the marketing anymore. That is a huge change. They're relying on you to do that. So when they're giving you that advance, you are the marketer, you are the salesperson for your book. And it's very important to understand the psychology of that. So in short, you need a badass world-class book proposal. Next, you need a big platform. A platform is essentially your audience, your reach. This is something that publishers absolutely look for. It's your email list. It's your text message list. I use Superphone. Awesome, awesome tool. I'll link to it below in the description if you want to use that. You need a social media following, or you need a big name. You need to be a household name. You need to be a celebrity. If you are, these are things that they look for. But even then, a little nuance. David Goggins, you may know him, the baddest mother effer alive. That guy did not go with a traditional book publishing deal. He went with Scribe, the company I mentioned. Now, he has sold millions of copies of his book, Can't Hurt Me. Millions of copies. And he did it via self-publishing through Scribe. So even then, for many people, most people, it makes sense, even for a celebrity who could go and get a 7-figure book deal like David Goggins very easily. He could have been given $1 million advance or more very easily. He did not choose to go that route, which is very interesting and something to think about. Now, again, as I said, I can intro you to Scribe. Just DM me if you would like. And the reason I say that, just in full transparency, I had a call recently, just a general networking call with their CEO, Javon McCormick. Absolutely amazing guy. He was, grew up like a hustler, the son of a pimp. I mean, doesn't even have a college degree. It's a remarkable story. Friends with Tucker Max, the original founder, and Charlie Hone, who has been a huge help. Thank you, Charlie. Who is their head of multimedia, their head of video at that company. So I'm just friends with them, and I really, truly value these guys. So now, the pros and cons of traditional book publishing. Here are some of the pros. You get, in most cases, distribution at bookstores. This is the reason that people typically want a traditional deal, is that they want to get their book in the bookstore. Now, you can still do that with self-publishing, by the way. It is totally doable. But one of the benefits of the traditional publishers, they'll get you into Barnes & Noble, right? They'll get you into these bookstores. You also have a stronger chance at hitting the New York Times bestseller list. For some reason, and you can Google this later if you want to go down this rabbit hole, it's crazy. The way the New York Times bestseller list works is completely not transparent, and it's kind of like this little, group of people that get to decide. Maybe I'm not saying this correctly, but this is at least what my research has led me to believe, is that it's not the most transparent, obvious process, and hopefully they're improving that over time. But you, in general, as a traditional publisher, perhaps through the prestige of being through the traditional publisher, perhaps through the ability of the traditional publisher to give direct book numbers and sales to the New York Times list, have a better chance of hitting that list. But of course, David Goggins has been on that list for weeks and weeks and weeks. So it does not count you out by self-publishing. It just gives you a better chance. I probably don't know enough about this point. I would research that on your own. A few years ago, I had read some very interesting things about how closed-knit of a group this New York Times list is, and hard to understand. There's no algorithm that's exposed in terms of how you really get in. The best understanding that most people have is it's book sales per week, and that velocity in particular on the first week is the most important thing, the first couple weeks, to making sure you hit the New York Times bestseller list. My favorite reason for going with a traditional publisher, the pro, is you get a team of people to rip your book apart and help you with the creative process. Everything from the book cover to the book title to the editor and the editing of the book itself to the structure and the outline. all of it is up for discussion and negotiation. Now, this can be a con if you are a control freak and you already know exactly what your book wants to look like and you don't want any of it to change. You don't want the title to change. You don't want the structure to change. You don't want the content to change. You don't want the voice to change. Traditional publishing is not for you. But as I said, that's my favorite thing, because in my world with my book Unleashed that I'm working on, my outcome is to create the best book possible in terms of reaching as many people and making it the best product possible, the best reading experience possible. And for that reason, I like that pro of traditional publishing. You also have a chance at possible traditional media exposure with traditional publishing, like TV and magazines. Now, for the cons of traditional publishing, it is very difficult to get a deal. We will talk about how to get a deal, as I said in point number 5, but it's very difficult to get a deal. Most people will not. It's probably something like 0.05% that get a deal. It's probably less than that. You should count on no marketing support whatsoever, because if they do support your book, great, it's a bonus, but don't count on it. And I would think that a lot of people go into traditional publishing assuming that's the main benefit, but these days it is not. Next, it is a long process. Let me tell you something. I have been working on, not consistently, but waiting to do this traditional book publishing deal and working on my proposal for this book for 5 years. I kid you not, no exaggeration, 5 years. I looked back in my Google Docs from my very first proposal recently. It is a long process. And I'm on my 3rd iteration of the book proposal, not like 3rd version. I probably have like 25, versions, no more than that total of each one, but 3rd one with a different collaborator, a different book proposal specialist. This most recent one, I started in January of 2020 and finished in end of February, early March 2021. The book proposal. So the book proposal took over a year. That is just to get to a point where my agent can go and shop it to publishers. From that point, it's going to be, from the point, how long is it going to take to get the deal? Who knows? From the point that there is a deal negotiated and finalized and signed, typically they want to see your book manuscript, back in like 9 months or 12 months. But by the time your book is printed and on shelves is like a year and a half. It is a long process. It takes years to do a traditionally published book deal. All of this could be done much faster with self-publishing, as you can imagine, which we will talk about. Next, you do not own the rights to your book. This is a big deal that should be really emphasized for most people. You have to understand what that means. That means you just simply do not own the rights to the book itself. You typically don't own the rights to the audio. This affects in particular fiction book authors. Like, you don't own the rights to be able to go and make a movie with your book. Now, that doesn't mean that your publisher won't go and try to make a movie with your book, because think about authors like J.K. Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter, and it became one of the craziest, most, highest grossing movies of all time, series of movies of all time. But, you're not going to get the majority of the profit and things like that. So you don't own the rights. You don't get to take it internationally. There's a lot of nuances to this one. I highly recommend, for those of you that are curious about rights, go and spend some time down that rabbit hole in terms of the rights. Now, that doesn't mean you can't negotiate certain rights into your contract up front when you do your traditional book publishing deal. That is important to know. Having that is power. That knowledge is power. Next, you make a lot less money. Probably like $1.50 to $2 on the hardcover. I think it's based on a percentage per book. I mean, you make more like, I'm really ballparking here, $6, $7, $8 a book on your self-published book. So we're talking anywhere from 300 to 400 to 500% more dollars per book by self-publishing. You do not do traditional publishing to make money. And if you think you're going to become the next Deepak Chopra or Mark Manson, who, Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, that sold millions of copies, that's just a form of delusion. Like, don't go into writing your book and traditionally publishing your book expecting that. Just don't expect that, because that's just delusional. Those books come around once every 5 years, approximately, that level of bestseller. Here's another con, I think, is that they need you oftentimes more than you need them. You do need a traditional publisher if you're looking to do some of the things that we've talked about, but they need you a lot. They need you to sell books. They need your platform. They need your book. They need your brain. They need you. And so that's really something to take into account. You need a book proposal. And as we've talked about, that's a super long process. And you need an agent. And these are all cons and challenges and obstacles to doing a traditional book. So now, last but not least, because we're going to go over the pros and cons of self-publishing as a bonus, how do you get a traditional deal? Well, first, you need to create a book proposal. Now, my favorite book and resource on this, I'm going to go a little old school on you, is Author 101, Best-Selling Book Proposals, The Insider's Guide to Selling Your Work by Rick Frischman and Robin Friedman Spizman. I devoured this book in every single way. You can see my highlights if you're watching on the video, my marks. I mean, I devoured every inch of this book. And yet, after all of that, this is why I say it's been 5 years. After all of that, I wrote my own proposal. I took it to my agent, and he was just like, yeah, no. I even went through his course, my agent at the time, Scott Hoffman, his course on book proposals. Dude, I'm telling you, it is a bitch to put a book proposal together. It is hard. I am a decently intelligent and skilled entrepreneur. Let's just put it that way. And I couldn't do it. I needed help. I had to bring in outside help. And you really got to take that into consideration. So what you need is a book proposal. If you're going to do it, this is the resource I highly recommend. Now, I might be an outlier. Like, I think Tim Ferriss did his own book proposal. And that's where I think I got this resource, was from Tim Ferriss. And I absolutely love the book. So what I did is I hired a specialist, a book proposal specialist, to create it for me. The first two I tried didn't work. My first, the one that I had the longest, we spent like a couple years creating that book proposal, spent $7,000 with her. And in the end, the book proposal was not good enough. Not good enough for me or my agent. I mean, it was just bad. It just was bad. She didn't get it. Unfortunately, it doesn't mean anything against her or anything like that. It's just, it wasn't a good fit. There's a vision of what the book should be, and there's a voice, and there's a structure, and there's all this stuff. And if you don't get it, you don't get it. And it's hard, but we hit a point where we hit a block, and it was like, this just isn't it. And $7,000 down the drain. Now, my current collaborator and book proposal, specialist, David Moldawer, is the best. And there's a range of what a book proposal will cost you. It's, I would say, minimum $5,000, top end-ish, probably $20,000. My guy was at the top end, and I was like, wow, that's a lot, but he's worth every penny. He's awesome. I loved my experience of working with him. My agents, I say agents because I have two co-agents through Folio Literary, Steve Troja and Jan. And yeah, they loved it. So, it's like, it was worth it. So we'll see what happens, right? But you need a book proposal. Next, you need to build that platform. You got to build that email list. You got to build that social media following, text message list, whatever it is, your TikTok following. You've got to have a platform. In my case, I have been spending years and years and years building email lists through my companies, Project Evo, through my personal brand, armanassadi.com, through my newsletter, through my my text message list, all these various ways of building a platform, building a following through my Instagram. And these are all ways to connect with an audience so that when the time comes, you can show that you can sell books. And ideally, you can show the publisher, to really get a proposal, show that you can sell something, ideally books. Or, if you have an e-commerce business, that's great too, because show that you can sell to that audience is even better. That's really what you want to show. Next, you need to get an agent, as I've mentioned. So how do you get that agent? First of all, The cold calling, cold solicitation approach is terrible. Never do that. Never do that with throwing your book to publishers, and don't do that with agents either. Don't do that in general in life. Always look for a warm intro. Go to your network, put up a post on social media, ask to connect with agents. Does anyone know a literary agent? Go to other authors and network with them and build relationship and ask them for an intro to their agent. That's honestly the best way. But no cold calling. Without an agent, your book proposal that you spent all that time on, or your collaborator and your specialist spent all that time on, will go to the so-called slush pile. The slush pile is where all the unsolicited queries and book proposals go at these publishers. So the agent, you need the agent in order to pitch the publishers. They will do the selling, they will do the pitching, they will do the soliciting. And then finally, how to get a traditional deal. Cross your fingers, hope for a decent deal. And if you get an offer or two, or at most ideal, incredible situation is that your book proposal, your book goes to an auction and multiple publishers and editors bid on it and pitch you on, a deal. That's the best case. And hope for a decent deal and negotiate good terms. Always negotiate. Don't be scared to negotiate. Remember, you're okay. You won't lose anything. You have leverage. And that goes for everything in life. Negotiating your salary, whatever it is. That's that. Now, as a bonus, here are the pros and cons of self-publishing. Pro number one, it's much faster. You don't need a book proposal. You can go straight to book creation mode, write the book. You can write the book first. By the way, if I did mention, I don't think I did, you basically never, ever write your nonfiction book before you get the deal. This is something most people don't understand. If you're looking for a traditional deal and you're writing a nonfiction business psychology self-help book, you don't write the book. It's bad to write the book. You do the book proposal. The book proposal has the outline of the book in it and oftentimes a sample chapter. You don't want to write the book because if you've already written the book, they're going to be like, this is not the book. We want it different. Like I said, they're creative control. You want to make sure you haven't written a book. Now, for a fiction book, your book proposal is basically your manuscript. That is something I did not mention. Your book proposal for a fiction book is your manuscript, is the book itself. So in that case, yes, you can write the manuscript. Now, for self-publishing, it's much faster. You can get right into writing your book. You write the book, and then maybe you hire out some different contractors and helpers to create the book cover for you, to print it, to publish it, to get distribution, and all that stuff. You have a lot less headache, a lot less people involved. It's just easier to self-publish. You have full creative control and you have full rights. It is yours. You own the copyright. You own the book. It's yours. It's your work of art. It's your creation. So that's an important point. You make a lot more money because you own the rights, because you have no middle person between you and the sale. You take that book, whatever your cost is, you sell it, the profit is yours. I mean, that's pretty much it in the most simple terms. I'm sure there are cases where, there is a distributor or you're paying for distribution or things like that, which you can do as well. And there's no proposal, right? There's no proposal or anything. Now, if you're self-publishing, I do recommend this book because this is a business plan for your book. It helps you create an outline for your book so that when it comes time to write your book, you know exactly what you're doing. So not having to do a book proposal doesn't mean you should not. I think that's very important to note. Now, what are some of the cons of self-publishing? You have to pay for everything up front. You have to pay for it. When you do a traditional deal, they pay you, then you go and you do your book and you make back that advance in royalties, right? So the way I look at it is with self-publishing, you're paying for things up front. It's a bit of a longer return on investment, but the return on investment is much bigger, right? You pay for the cost of the book, you pay for the publishing, you pay for the printing, you pay for the designer, you pay for the launch, all that stuff. But then you're making back the money quickly. It just takes a little longer to get that and you make much more profit. But keep in mind, you pay for things up front. There's lots of moving parts to self-publishing a book. That is why if I was self-publishing a book, I would never do it alone. and I would hire Scribe. Like, no question, I would hire Scribe. Your book may end up not being as high quality. Without that creative control, without that standard of what a traditional book should be, it's possible that your self-published book will not be as high quality, right? So bring in some collaborators, bring in some professionals, hire Scribe, in my opinion. And finally, it can be challenging to hit the New York Times list for reasons that are quite elusive, but you can always, almost in many cases, I know people have done it, buy your way onto the New York Times bestseller list. You really have to ask yourself why, and is that worth it? But we live in a world of blue check marks and NFTs and digital collectibles and New York Times bestseller list badges. So I get it. There is a wonderful prestige that comes with being able to say you hit the New York Times bestseller list. But I'll tell you this from experience. I remember I was working with another New York Times bestseller, Jeff Walker, who wrote Launch, hit New York #1. And we were in a meeting one time, and he was like, you would think that if you hit the New York Times, especially #1, that the press and the media would be knocking down your door and be like, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? And all these collaborations and opportunities would be flooding you, but no. And I found the same thing. It's like you would think that being on the cover of a magazine means that every other magazine now wants you to be on their cover and you're going to get blown up and get $1 million deals thrown at you. No, it doesn't work. I was on the cover of Founder magazine, and yes, I definitely saw some great results from it and people reaching out and people like, oh, that's cool, man. Okay, all that stuff. But it wasn't like my door was getting broken down, and I think a lot of people imagine that that's what being on the New York Times is going to do for you. And it will not. I can promise you that. The only time that's going to happen is when you create a perennial bestseller, a book that cannot help but be a bestseller because of how fucking good it is. That is how you guarantee yourself getting placement on the New York Times list. A book like Atomic Habits by James Clear, or a book like The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. These books have been on the New York Times for so long because they are good, high quality, perennially best-selling books, books that have gone viral, the books that people recommend, books that actually help people and that people continue to talk about. That is, in my opinion, why the best way to hit the New York Times and the best way to have a successful book launch. He has a resource, a blog post that breaks down exactly how to sell 1 million copies of your book. And also, I'm going to link to a resource that Scribe put together on the David Goggins, the Can't Hurt Me book case study of how and why that went so viral and how to have your book sort of do the same and emulate that overall psychology of it. So, in summary, should you traditionally publish your book? That is the overview. There is no easy yes or no answer. Each one of those points is very important. It all comes down to you. If you would like some help, if you'd like some consulting, if you have a question, hit me up. Go to armanassadi.com. Check out my consulting page on the website. Send me a message. Leave a comment below. If you enjoyed this and you liked it, please don't forget to hit the like button, the subscribe button, share this with a friend. And again, it is not for the faint of heart. It is not for everyone. It is like giving birth. If you do it, I wish you the best of luck. Enjoy the journey. Peace.